He thought she was just another black woman. But when she said, "I'm Federal Judge Monique Bryant," everything fell apart. In a single moment of arrogance, Captain Cole Whitman destroyed his 20-year career and accidentally exposed a secret network of police corruption. Within 72 hours, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the entire nation would know what he did. This isn't just a wrongful arrest, it's a reckoning for unchecked power. Subscribe now, because this story will leave you stunned right up to the final moment. It was a Monday night in Birmingham, Georgia. A light rain fell, and the yellow lights of the federal courthouse parking lot cast shadows on the damp pavement, creating a scene that was both quiet and ominous. Federal Judge Monique Bryant, after more than 14 hours presiding over a high-stakes case, walked slowly toward her silver Mercedes, clutching a leather briefcase filled with classified files. At the same time, a few blocks away, Police Captain Cole Whitman, a 52-year-old white man with over 2 decades in the force, received a call reporting suspicious activity near the courthouse. Without hesitation, he ordered 3 junior officers to join him. In Whitman's mind, any sign of disorder was a chance to assert authority, and he never cared whether that authority was legally his or not. Upon arrival, he spotted a group of young people near a side entrance of the courthouse, actually late-shift court employees heading home. Without checking IDs or asking questions, he signaled his team to surround and question them. The air turned tense. Nervous glances were exchanged. Questions went unanswered. From a distance, Judge Bryant watched with the sharp eye of someone who had seen hundreds of procedural violations masked as law enforcement. She knew something was off, unable to stand by any longer. She locked her car, gripped her briefcase, walked forward, and spoke up, "Excuse me. Officers, what is the legal basis for this detention?" Whitman spun around. In front of him stood a well-dressed black woman with a clear, commanding voice, far too composed to be an ordinary civilian. But to him, that very composure was infuriating. Being questioned in front of his subordinates wounded his pride. And that wounded pride quickly turned to rage. And in that very moment, Cole Whitman stepped into dangerous territory, one that was already slipping beyond his control. But instead of backing off or considering the woman's calm warning, Cole Whitman took one more step deeper into the most disastrous mistake of his career. Faced with Judge Bryant's composed and lawful question, Whitman didn't even bother to answer. "Step back. This is police business," he snapped, his eyes flashing with rage. But the woman in front of him did not flinch. As a federal judge, she knew precisely where the legal boundaries lay when it came to police conduct on federal property. She firmly asked for the legal grounds behind the detention of individuals she recognized as courthouse staff. Whitman saw none of it as a warning, only as defiance. In his mind, there was no law. No procedure, only fury fueled by prejudice. A black woman daring to question his authority, unable to contain his boiling ego. Whitman stormed forward, grabbed Judge Bryant's arm, and slammed her hard against the hood of the patrol car. "You're interfering with police business. You're under arrest," he shouted. Her leather briefcase hit the ground. Classified documents scattered. Pages fluttering across the concrete under the damp night breeze. The sound of the impact echoed through the empty lot like a gunshot. The scene of violent, uncontrolled, left nearby courthouse employees frozen in shock. More importantly, it was captured from multiple angles by the federal courthouse's advanced surveillance system. The 3 officers who had accompanied Whitman began to realize that they were witnessing something extremely serious. Because the woman being pinned to the vehicle showed no fear. She lifted her head, eyes calm, and spoke clearly. "Officer Whitman. Badge number 2847. Your direct supervisor is Lieutenant James Clayton. Extension 4477. and you are now in violation of Federal Statute 18 U.S.C. 242. In that moment, the air turned ice cold. Only someone at the highest level of the judiciary could recite that information with such precise authority. The anger hadn't even cooled when that voice rang out sharp, cold, and thunderous through the light drizzle. I am Federal Judge Monique Bryant. And you've just made a grave mistake. Whitman froze for a second. Just a second. But instead of backing off, he roared, "Judge, don't try to scare me with titles. You think I'm afraid of that? I am the law here. And you're interfering with a police investigation." He clenched his jaw, gritted his teeth, and growled, "I don't care who you are, not the president. Not the Queen of England, you still bow to the badge." The cold steel of the handcuffs touched Judge Bryant's wrists, but instead of resisting, she calmly raised her head, looked him dead in the eye, and said, word for word, 18 U.S.C. 242, deprivation of constitutional rights under color of law. What you've just done, yes. It's being recorded. From 3 separate camera angle scan, get you 10 years in federal prison. Oh. The words sliced through the air like a blade. The 3 officers behind Whitman fell silent. Officer Torres instinctively stepped back. Facepaless paper. Jackson pulled his hand away from his weapon like it had caught fire. Martinez looked around, his panicked eyes landing on the security camera mounted on the nearby light pole, pointed directly at them. None of them believed this was just an ordinary citizen anymore. The way she stated Whitman's badge number, his commanding officer's name, and quoted federal law, so precisely it sent chills down their spines. Only someone very powerful would know all that. Upstairs in the federal building's security control room, the agents had already stood up from their desks. The facial recognition system flashed across the screen. Monique Bryant, federal judge. Southern District of Georgia. When police attack a civilian, the system responds accordingly. But when a sitting federal judge is unlawfully detained, normal procedures are immediately bypassed. An emergency alert sounded. The radio transmission cut through the silence. Code 2847. Tactical response team deploy immediately. Oh, and for Cole Whitman, the true nightmare had only just begun. The screech of tires on pavement rang out like a warning shot from justice itself. Less than 90 seconds after the emergency alert was triggered, 3 black SUVs with federal plates glided into the courthouse parking lot like shadows carrying retribution. The doors flew open. Agents from the Federal Protective Service, FPS, stepped out, weapons ready in hand. Their tactical vests reflecting the golden light of the parking lot. No one raised a weapon because they didn't have to. Their mere presence froze the air. One agent shouted with firm, commanding authority, "Release the detainee immediately. This is Federal Judge Monique Bryant." Whitman whipped around. His face drained of color. He knew that name. Everyone in law enforcement did. She was the nightmare of dirty cops, the judge who had placed 3 police departments under federal oversight, the one who once signed an arrest warrant for a police commissioner during a live press conference, and now she was standing right in front of him, wrists red from handcuffs, judicial robe dusted with dirt. Yet her eyes calm and composed radiated a terrifying kind of power. Whitman let go as if he'd touched a live wire. The handcuffs clattered onto the patrol car's metal hood with a sharp, cold clang. Judge Bryant calmly bent down, picking up each classified document scattered at her feet. No yelling, no fury, just serenity and the undeniable authority of someone who knows exactly what she holds in her hands. It was that gaze that made Whitman realize it was over. But what he didn't know was this. This wasn't just a wrongful arrest. This was the spark that would ignite the largest investigation the city had ever seen. A purge that wouldn't stop at one arrogant officer but would dig deep into the rotting roots of an entire corrupted system. Just minutes after the handcuffs were removed from Judge Monique Bryant's wrists, the entire federal apparatus roared to life like a massive machine long primed for retribution. Emergency reports were immediately sent to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. And when the name Cole Whitman appeared in the system, many within the legal community were stunned. They had heard of him before, had seen complaints, but no one had ever had the authority to pull the full weight of the federal system into action. Until now, federal prosecutors began reopening files. Within hours, they uncovered dozens of complaints spanning 2 decades. Familiar names, cases previously closed due to insufficient evidence or lost documentation. Victims who had been silent-setter threatened into never filing at all. What emerged were extensive allegations of excessive force, racial discrimination, and, most damning, fabrication of police records to cover misconduct. In the past, many of these complaints had been buried through backdoor deals, shallow internal reviews, or quietly settled lawsuits, but this time, no favors, no connections, and no backchannels could stop what was coming. The FBI officially launched a full-scale investigation under 42 U.S. Code Section 14,141, a powerful federal statute specifically designed to root out systemic misconduct within law enforcement agencies. When that statute is invoked, the target is no longer the individual officer but the entire structure that enabled him. The local police department descended into chaos. Emergency meetings stretched through the night. Old files thought long forgotten were unearthed. And the first person summoned, Lieutenant James Clayton, Whitman's direct superior, a man who once believed every incident could be buried with a phone call. But this time, the call came from Bryant, and it carried a storm they could no longer outrun. As documents and files continued to be unsealed, the investigation quickly expanded beyond the name Cole Whitman. The next target, Lieutenant Howard Haynes, the head of internal affairs for over 15 years. And suspiciously, perhaps predictably, nearly every complaint filed against Whitman had landed on Haynes's desk and ended the same way. Insufficient evidence? But the FBI wasn't buying that. They began combing through internal emails, phone logs, message transcripts, and surveillance records. What they found was undeniable. Haynes wasn't just covering for Whitman, he was actively colluding with him. There were messages scheduling meetings before internal hearings, emails outlining how to rewrite incident reports to avoid investigation, even recorded phone calls where the two discussed how to shut down sensitive cases before they reached the press. At 2:30 a.m., federal agents knocked on Haynes's door at his suburban home in Marietta. He was arrested on multiple federal charges, including conspiracy to deprive civil rights, 18 U.S.C. Section 241, deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242, and most damning organized criminal conspiracy under the RICO Act, 18 U.S.C. Section 1962. Haynes's arrest was the spark that blew the case wide open. Dozens of officers once considered Whitman's men were suddenly under scrutiny. Within weeks, 23 officers had been indicted. Employees who had once stayed silent out of fear were now lining up to testify. Administrative staff, legal aides, even junior officers who had once been threatened or coerced into looking the other way. Each testimony, each newly unearthed file, led to the same chilling conclusion. This wasn't the misconduct of a few rogue individuals, it was a deeply entrenched, organized system of corruption, protected and perpetuated over decades. And now, the net was closing. No one was safe. The city of Birmingham was in turmoil. News outlets reported updates by the hour. Whitman's name was splashed across national headlines. Citizens flooded the streets in protest, demanding sweeping police reform. The mayor and the city council held emergency sessions to respond to mounting calls for federal oversight of the police department. Meanwhile, victims of Whitman and Haynes came forward in droves, filing civil lawsuits, seeking damages that reached into the tens of millions of dollars. Insurance companies refused to pay out, citing evidence that the city had knowingly concealed misconduct for years. Judge Bryant, both as a victim and a sitting federal judge, was appointed to the National Police Reform Advisory Committee. Her voice, once calm and deliberate in the courtroom, now rang clear in public hearings. We must end the system that shields corrupt officers. They must be held to the same light of justice as every other citizen. Oh, her words echoed through the halls of Congress during a Senate hearing, capturing the attention of lawmakers across party lines. The result, a legislative draft that would become the Federal Police Accountability Act, a new legal framework designed to transform law enforcement nationwide. The city that had once turned a blind eye now stood at the epicenter of a movement, and Judge Bryant had become its unshakable symbol of truth, justice, and reform. 8 months after the arrest, Cole Whitman, Howard Haynes, and Lieutenant Clayton stood trial in federal court. The presiding judge declared it the largest police corruption case in Georgia in the past 50 years. Dozens of victims took the stand to testify. Evidence poured in from courthouse surveillance footage, police body cameras, federal agent testimonies, to confidential internal documents. Together, they painted a damning picture. Whitman was not a misguided officer, but the ringleader of a criminal network wearing a badge. The jury took less than 5 hours to reach a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts, Whitman was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, with all assets seized and a lifetime ban from any law enforcement role. Haynes received 10 years. Clayton was given 8 years for aiding, abetting, and enabling the conspiracy. The verdict sent a thunderous message across the law enforcement community. Not even those at the top are above the law. The courtroom was silent as judgment was handed down, but the impact reverberated through police departments nationwide. This trial wasn't just about 3 men. It was about a system and the beginning of its reckoning. Following the historic trial, it wasn't just the 3 men in handcuffs who faced consequences. An entire system that once seemed untouchable began to crumble from within. The U.S. Department of Justice officially placed the entire Birmingham Police Department under federal oversight for 5 years, marking an unprecedented turning point in Georgia's law enforcement history. A special federal monitoring committee was established, chaired by Dr. Naomi Gardner, a former federal prosecutor and a respected expert in criminal justice reform. This committee didn't merely observe, it enforced systemic reform, mandatory body cameras for all officers, an independent civilian review board completely separate from the police department, and immediate termination for any officer found to have repeated violations or civil rights abuse. The cost of reform was staggering, over $50 million, putting immense strain on the city's budget, but the impact was undeniable. In just the first year, complaints of excessive force dropped by 67%. Community trust surged. Citizens began to see justice not as a privilege but as a right finally enforced. And at the center of it all stood federal Judge Monique Bryant. From a woman wrongfully handcuffed in a dark parking lot, she had become a national symbol of judicial reform. She received multiple civil rights awards, was featured on the cover of Time magazine, and was invited to speak at global forums on government accountability and justice reform. But for Judge Bryant, success wasn't measured in awards or applause. It wasn't about prestige. It was about one thing: ensuring that people like Cole Whitman would never again have a place in America's justice system. From one moment of humiliation in a courthouse parking lot, She had sparked a fire for reform, and that fire went on to burn down a dark structure once protected by silence and power. 1 year after the fateful arrest, Federal Judge Monique Bryant stood before the United States Senate. She was not only a living witness to an egregious abuse of legal authority, but also a living symbol of a justice system in the midst of transformation. In her hands was the newly drafted Federal Police Accountability Act, a bill born directly from the Whitman case, where justice was publicly violated and then restored through unwavering resolve. The bill passed the Senate with 78 votes in favor, a rare show of bipartisan unity in an era of deep division. The law mandates that all police departments receiving federal funding must implement independent oversight mechanisms, maintain round-the-clock body camera use, and initiate automatic independent investigations into any incident involving violence or civil rights violations. The President of the United States formally signed the bill into law at the White House. In that solemn ceremony, he invited Judge Bryant to serve as the country's national reform advisor, tasked with helping implement oversight and reform mechanisms across the entire nation. As for Cole Whitman, the man who once roared, "I am the law here," he now lives in isolation in a medium-security federal prison, despised by many who were once victims of police brutality. His family has abandoned him. His assets have been seized. His pension revoked. His name is now used in ethics courses, as a cautionary tale, not as a law enforcer, but as a symbol of corrupted power. Yet, the most enduring legacy isn't his 12-year prison sentence. It is the sweeping judicial reform that his blind cruelty inadvertently triggered. In an America where faith in justice had once faltered, it was his wrongdoing that became the catalyst for change, a powerful reminder that no one, in uniform or in office, stands above the law. 2 years have passed since that fateful night, and America has undergone a sweeping transformation in its law enforcement landscape. Across more than 30 states, police departments have implemented key provisions of the Federal Police Accountability Act, leading to the removal of over 800 officers for repeated violations involving brutality or discrimination. Communities that once lived in fear have begun to feel heard. Cases previously buried under the guise of procedure are now being reopened and re-examined. On the international stage, the name Monique Bryant has become more than a symbol of American justice. It is now a global beacon of what real reform looks like when driven by courage, not rhetoric. She was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people of the decade, not for grand speeches, but for unwavering resolve in a moment when most would have crumbled. In Birmingham, a police training center now bears her name. Every new recruit there must undergo intensive instruction in human rights, limits of authority, and the humility required to wear a badge. During the Academy's opening ceremony, Judge Bryant delivered just one line: "I don't want to be remembered for being handcuffed, but for refusing to stay silent." As for Cole Whitman, now known only by his inmate number, he has exhausted all legal appeals. After a series of humiliating defeats, he remains a quiet figure in the shadows of a federal prison. While his name is cited in policy documents as the necessary spark that ignited a national reckoning, the truth remains: no one wished for a Cole Whitman. But without him, America may have continued to ignore the cracks beneath its justice system, and so, from a single unlawful shove beside a patrol car, a nationwide awakening began, not just in law, but in the conscience of a nation. This story reminds us that a single moment of abuse can ignite a tremor strong enough to shake an entire system. When justice is violated, silence becomes complicity, but calm, knowledge, and courage can become the light that pierces through darkness. If I were the person in this story, I might have felt fear, anger, even a desire to walk away. But what truly matters isn't how we feel, it's what we do next. Not retaliation, not screaming, but using truth to expose lies. using the law to bring injustice into the light. Will racism still exist in 2050? I don't know. But if every person stands up when wrong is done, if individuals are empowered and trusted, then hope won't feel so far away. Justice doesn't arrive on its own, it must be claimed, protected, and remembered every single day. And maybe, just maybe, what we do today, no matter how small, can plant the seed for a more just America tomorrow.